If you're doing this kind of stuff, I mean, that's fantastic. You can notice a difference.
Yeah, I had a webcam camera that I would just kind of throw on, and it was good. But yeah, I mean, sadly it's kind of the story of today, where it's like, yeah, to get on there, it's like the quality is just getting higher and higher. I mean, there's guys that are just doing such high quality stuff now on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to be more in the YouTube world, which is very video focused. So
Yeah, if you come across a short or something that doesn't look well done, you just 1 second you're scrolling through it.
yeah, it's like evolving year after year, like
Mm-hmm.
the like in the demands as far as technology. But the camera's been working great. I definitely have to charge the battery quite a bit, because it's like if I do like an hour and a half interview, it's running out of juice. So I might need to buy a
Can
new
it be
battery.
plugged
But
in
but
throughout the
it's
conversation?
what's that?
Can it
Can
be
you keep it
charging
plugged
throughout the
in while you're
conversation?
interviewing?
I mean, it's all plugged in. But maybe I have it plugged into my computer, but maybe there's another way to plug it directly into the outlet, but I haven't done that yet.
Well, my wife decorated my room for Christmas, so I've got my. Let's see. We're not allowed to do Christmas at church, not until Christmas. We can only do Advent stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
Father Advent, that's my rector. But my wife hung up my white stag.
Oh, there you go.
I hear
We do ours in stages.
Wishes.
Yeah, stages. It's like here in the United States, people are trying to start Christmas a few weeks before Thanksgiving. So.
Yep. Well, here we are right at 7.
Yep, and we are streaming. We are live on Facebook
Where's the link,
and
David?
YouTube.
On YouTube.
Yes, on YouTube.
On YouTube, Alexander.
Yes, I have a little helper.
Hey, David, where's the link?
Where would you like me to send it?
Wherever group chat works.
Okay, I'm going to dropping it in Patreon events. There's the YouTube.
Hey, Phil.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Happy
Hey,
C.S.
Phil.
Lewis reading day.
Cheers, indeed.
It's a great day.
God bless us,
It is.
everyone.
Kyle, I think I know everyone here except for you. I'm Phil.
Phil, nice to meet you. Kyle King with Barrel Aged Faith.
Excellent. I like your background.
Oh, thanks. Lots of Tolkien and Lewis.
Yeah.
And the Fathers. That's pretty much my podcast. So.
Excellent.
You're just basically
they're sort of
describing
our,
the things that Matt and I bonded over.
Yeah. There are.
That's exactly right.
I basically just use Lewis and Tolkien as sort of our guides to the ancient church. It's fun.
Yeah. I'm reading Gutchin's book on Cyril.
Oh.
My theology professor, Kate Sonderegger, lost a bet during the playoffs a couple of years ago, and so my Astros beat her Red Sox. And so she had to. I gave her a copy of Till We Have Faces, which I think she still hasn't read. But if I had lost, she would have given me the McGutcheon on Cyril of Alexandria. So once a week, I go to the coffee shop there just on Main Street and just sit down and read theology and be a priest in the public presence. So
there you go. So that's my life. I read Lewis or Tolkien one day, and then I'm reading the Fathers the next day, and it's amazing how they kind of breathe the same air. It's fun.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is now 2 minutes past, so I'm going to suggest that we start. And this is a special drink that I'm opening today.
Oh, you got some.
We
You're
flex.
holding out.
We flex.
Oh my gosh. I would trade my
So-
my Lagavulin 16 for that in a heartbeat.
So for those who don't know, Walter Hooper says that this is the whiskey that he went and got Lewis. And we know that
Give me one
because he
second.
sent an email to a certain Andrew Lazo.
David, I'm sorry. Someone
But-
just knocked on my door 4 times.
Oh, that's great because I was just about to ask you to welcome the audience to the stream. So, hi, I'll do that. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. Sorry for the few technical issues, but it's wonderful to see you all.
Yeah.
So, this is C.S. Lewis Reading Day. It is the inaugural C.S. Lewis Reading Day. And Andrew, would you mind just telling those watching, if they don't know already, where did all this come from?
Well, I don't know. I think it was kind of an idea in the air that we breathed up. I got a little tired. I love Tolkien. God love him. I'll drink to him. I've got my Tolkien icon right here next to me, for goodness sakes. Nothing wrong with that. But I kind of got a little jealous that Tolkien has Tolkien Reading Day on March 25th, the day of the destruction of the ring, and also the day of the Annunciation. And then there's to the Tolkien toast to the professor. And since Lewis is a professor too, I'm like, dang, why don't we toast the Professor Lewis as well? That's on January 3rd on Tolkien's birthday. And then on September 22nd, of course, there's Bilbo and Frodo's birthday. And so Tolkien's got 3 annual days that people go crazy for online. And I'm like, it's about time for a C.S. Lewis reading day, don't you think? And all you have to do is drop a good idea in David Bates's ear, and all the rest gets going.
Yeah, it does. Now, Matt, anything you want to say since I stole your welcoming of the audience? Hi, buddy.
No, I'm just genuinely super excited for this. David has been, anyone watching this, David has been planning this for a couple months and has put an insane amount of work into coordinating all this. You guys should see the notes that we have that he has prepped in response to this. So this is going to be a lot of fun. It's great to be here with you guys.
Absolutely. it
Well,
is.
I'd just like to point out that I've had several emails over the course of today with people talking about what they're going to be doing. So there's someone in France setting up a C.S. Lewis en France Facebook group to try and
I met
popularize
her.
him there.
I met her, Anne, on.
There you
We were in
go.
Romania together.
And I also got an email from Amy Faust. She said, I heard about this on the C.S. Lewis podcast. Our book club of expats living in the Caucasus Mountain area will honor him by reading and discussing passages from his writings 9 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. So stuff is happening, and that is just absolutely awesome. Now, Robert seems to be having a few difficulties getting on the stream. So while I disappear and try and sort that out, who's up next? Chris Pipkin's not here. Let's start with you, Carl. Would you mind just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. Kyle King of Barrel Aged Faith. I basically do interviews and podcasts and courses on really the ancient church, the church fathers, but I use C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien to sort of bring us into their sort of the air that they breathe. They operate in the same sort of symbolic universe. I didn't know this at first, but by reading both the fathers and scripture and Lewis and Tolkien, I was really surprised to see just how much intersections there were. Of course, they were devout, Tolkien and Lewis were devout Christians, but really they seem to have the same type of instincts. And so if you go to barrelagedfaith.com, I have a course called The Altar Above the Worlds, which takes Lewis and Tolkien's sort of writings, both their fictional and non-fictional takes on the Eucharist, Holy Communion, and where that intersects with scripture and the church fathers to help us see how maybe, the Eucharist is more than just a mere meal, but even transcends reality. And so it's the highest meal. It's the great meal. And so the altar above the worlds, it's also a playoff on Lewis and Paralandra. I believe it's Paralandra. He uses the phrase the face above the worlds, referring to God being the creator who unites the communion of worlds. Of course, there's other species, angelic and demonic, but also other intelligent life forms in his science fiction. And so I took that phrase face above the worlds and I translated it into altar above the worlds, kind of using the the book of Hebrews imagery for the altar in the Holy of Holies, heavenly place. And connecting that also with Lewis's own reflections on the Eucharist as Christ's real presence, but also having a sacrificial dimension, which he talks about, and I think in God of the Docks. And so, anyways, Barrel Age Faith is about diving into the ancient church, its doctrines, but basically using Lewis and Tolkien as our fun guides.
And why barrel aged?
Barrel aged, I mean, well, you guys are drinking some pretty good stuff there. Barrel aged it's a reference to an image where something is old but not expired, right?
Oh,
And so our modern world likes quick, it likes easy, it wants something that can fit their lifestyle in a contemporary way. But barrel aged really is something that you have to wait on, and it gets better with age. And so I think that the Christ and the apostles, they stored something in the apostolic cellars that's always there waiting for us. It's always refreshing, always invigorating. It's old, but never expired, always there for us to taste and to refresh and renew the world. So it's kind of the ancient future faith.
That's great. Well, and of course, Lewis thought his books would all be out of print and he'd be forgotten in 5 years, and
Exactly.
how little he knew. And I think that he grows better with age. I mean, there's so little that one has to apologize for, even for a book 80 years old, like Mere Christianity, which I teach every Sunday at my parish. So great. Well, Stephen is here from Lorehaven.
Tis I, yes. Thanks for inviting me, y'all. This is fantastic.
Absolutely. Oh, by the way, Kyle, are you drinking anything, man?
Oh man, I if I do a late night stream, I normally do. Obviously not in the morning, but I just have coffee right now, so I feel kind of lame.
Well,
Yeah,
I got
I
Pints
should
with
have
Jack
something.
and Guinness and Pints with Jack. Yes, so I'll be a respectabigo before long. So I'm drinking for
There
you.
we
What
go.
you got, Stephen?
This here is a caramel mocha from a chain store around here called Dutch Bros. So there is no shot or anything especially special in this beverage, but it's mine.
That's great. Good.
I love it. Well, welcome. Well, Stephen, can you introduce yourself to everyone?
Absolutely. I feel like the fresher face here. I'm Stephen Burnett. I publish Lorehaven.com, which is a community of fans, Christian fans in particular, who celebrate not only C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and all of the patron saints of Christian-made fantastical stories, but newer stories from other authors who are writing in similar but not identical genres, science fiction, fantasy, even a smattering of paranormal here or there. We have a podcast called Fantastical Truth every Tuesday. And then we also do weekly reviews of the best Christian-made fantastical novels that we can find.
I love it. Well, how did you get into that?
Got into it because obviously being a attempting creator of these kinds of stories myself and a lifetime Lewis fan, almost lifetime Tolkien fan, caught up to him a little bit later. Don't tell anybody. It's just us. It's just us here. But I also caught on early to some I would say more mainstream evangelical fiction, and then as I kept growing, while I appreciate those kinds of novels and will still defend them to some extent, there is a something about Lewis's fiction, which you all know, that I would like to not necessarily bottle up, but I would like to see more of that kind of sensibility, not just fine literature, but more of that transcendence, more of that creativity in Christian-made stories. So what we aim to do is find those that are coming closest to that, and then positively review them. We also have a Discord server called the Lorehaven Guild, in which we have monthly book quests, pushing, what was my last, it was either 200 or 300 heroes. I think it's getting close to 300 heroes there in the Lorehaven Guild Discord server. And then in January, we'll be doing our read through of the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Yes.
My favorite.
Yes. It's even better than Till We Have Faces. Now, I just threw it out there to see who would scowl. There we go. Shots fired. Yes, exactly. But I'm not a pacifist
those aren't
either.
Really shots.
No, not at all. Well, you know what kind of shots go on at this kind of crew.
He's shooting blank.
Let's get him, Andrew.
Let me
is
just
true.
pull out the first edition.
The first edition. Okay, there we go. I am now owned with Facts and Logic. I believe this one says.
Smell it. There we go.
Yeah, see, this one has the now a major motion picture holiday 2005. So you know which edition this is.
No, I love those
we-
full color collectors, and certainly my favorite.
Those are amazing.
Dawn Treader, but
I think so. I am partial to the one where you actually see the ship and it's kind of a more pastel, amber washed, orangey look, and you actually see that it's on the Silver Sea, carving that path behind it. That may be my second choice, but I like this one. It's classic Pauline Baines. A couple of years ago, we did our book quest through The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then after that, Prince Caspian. So you can tell which reading order we're following. So I thought, well, we've set the precedent, so we're gonna go through that one starting in January.
right.
Well, let's keep going around the
Around the horn.
round table here a little bit. And Robert, we have not met, but
Bob
I believe you're with
Trexler.
I believe you're with the New York C.S. Lewis Society. Is that correct?
That's right.
Beautiful. Can you introduce yourself for everyone?
And say
Okay.
something, please, about Winged Lion. We owe such a debt. The last time Bob and I saw each other, we went to the Strand Bookshop and had some great Chinese food on the Lower East Side. Bob, yeah, tell us more.
Well, I joined the New York C.S. Lewis Society at the end of the last century. And not long after that, Jim Como, who was editing their publication, had to take on the chairmanship of his department at York College and asked if I would be the editor. So that was 23 years ago. I've been doing it since then. We have a publication called the C.S. Lewis Bulletin. It's published 6 times a year, approximately 20 pages per issue. But as to the history of the society, it began in November of 1969. You can read about all the details on our website, www.nycslsociety.com.
And Matt will surely drop a link.
Oh,
Or,
okay.
David will. Yeah.
Matt.
So I think we have a good quality feature articles. Probably a lot of people joining tonight have published there. We'd love to have more people submit. We have feature articles. We have book reviews. Among our very earliest members in 1970 included C.S. Lewis's brother Warney. Owen Barfield was a member.
Pedigree.
Clyde Kilby, Roger Lancelin Green,
Oh my gosh.
and then the previous generation of Lewis scholars, Peter Kreeft, Tom Howard, and we had many of the outstanding scholars through the years at various weekend events, and we've hosted Andrew's when we had live meetings. Andrew came. Michael Ward's first visit to the United States was to come to a New York meeting.
Nice.
Same with Jason from Finland. We were his first
Leipo
stop.
Järvi, yeah.
So there's a lot of great memories there. One thing I wanted to promote to have more people write, submit articles, but to do so, it's probably a good idea to be more familiar with the CSL bulletin. So we're doing a special for the next 24 hours, $5 for in honor of Lewis's birthday. So if you go to the website, you look at the sign up form, you look for the payment option that says Happy Birthday, Jack, and you can subscribe for $5.
I'm doing that right now.
Bargain.
Focus,
Seriously.
Andrew. Focus.
I'm focused, man.
And Robert, you also very kindly offered to sponsor some books for the giveaway, because this is a good time to talk about
Yes.
that. So
So
these are some of the books that people can win
one of-
today.
one of our founding members is Joe James Como. So this is a hardcover shrink wrap new book of his. It retailed for $22.95, but when Spence Publishing went out of business, I bought a case of them. So I've got a few on hand. So that there'll be 2 of those to give away. I don't know how you're going to divide them, if you are, between the East and West Coast. And then another book of James Como's 33 reviews and essays on the life and work of C.S. Lewis. So those are the 2 giveaways. And then we have the special to sign up for the bulletin.
Wonderful.
Oh, and you wanted me to say something about Wing Lion Press. Well, I owe my pleasure of running a small press to being the editor of the C.S. Lewis bulletin, because people would submit things, and I got to kind of the community of C.S. Lewis is international, and it's somewhat kind of an intimate crowd.
Yeah,
Everybody
David's got
pretty
one.
much knows everybody.
It is. And Bob, give us just a quick rundown of some of the Lewis titles that we have. I know that we got a crowd of guys and want to make sure to fit everybody in, but hit us up with some of the authors and some of the titles. I've got a bunch of your books on my shelf.
Okay, I think we have about a dozen C.S. Lewis titles, and we have about the same amount of George MacDonald titles. George
Great.
MacDonald is kind of my favorite, even over Lewis.
Whoa,
but
We'll
those
let
are
you
fighting
stay.
words.
We'll let you stay. He probably doesn't think enough about Till You Have Faces either. Kidding.
So let's see. We've got 2 books. 2 books by Como. His latest being Mystical Paralandra, that was published earlier this year. We have a study guide to the
Great Divorce.
Great Divorce.
Yeah.
Which
C.S.
is
Lewis
called
goes to
C.S.
heaven and C.S.
Yeah.
Lewis goes to hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And C.S. Lewis Goes to Hell by William O'Flaherty.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've got a book on the debate between Lewis and Barfield by Stephen Thornton.
Yeah.
Thorson, right. Let's see. I didn't prep myself very well.
No, don't worry. I'm pulling it up. Yeah.
Don't worry. We'll have links in the show notes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Will Voss and
Oh yes,
so many
we've
others.
got
Yeah.
a half a dozen by Will Voss that are
Joel
excellent.
Heck and Alan Snyder, who I was just in Romania with.
Yeah,
We did a
Jim
book launch
Prothero
there,
just wrote a book last year that's excellent. He's down with the Southern California C.S. Lewis Society.
Will Voss is
one of our bestsellers, to get back to MacDonald, which is the subject, isn't it? Is the annotated version of Phantastes. That's probably our top seller. And
Boy, I need to go shopping.
hope next year we will have the annotated edition of Lilith by
fantastic.
two top MacDonald scholars, Rod McGillis and John Pennington.
Great. We've had some more friends join in. Who else do we have here today, David?
Well, let's go to Joseph next.
Hi, nice to meet everybody.
Hey, Joseph.
Host and that's taken from chapter 1. Men Without Chests. So I began by doing a deep dive. Man, get across what is harder philosophy to the common people like myself so that we can get it. I think it's perhaps the most prophetic work of the 20th century. And so I'm trying to get across those concepts to people so that we can understand how we deal with our current society. So I started with that, and now I'm getting on to That Hideous Strength, and really looking forward to that. That's probably my favorite of the Lewis books. And then after that, I'm going to go to Building the Chest, and I'm probably going to go to Aristotle's Ethics for that. So my podcast is kind of a mix of Lewis and then not Lewis. The idea ultimately is to create men with chests.
Oh, wow.
I want that, Andrew.
Look at that.
I'll sell it
That's
to you.
better than that one hideous cover that doesn't make any sense. That one looks much better.
So yeah, that's the rough outline of my show, and it's great to meet all you guys. I think the only one I have met so far is David.
Yes. No, Joseph, I'm excited that you're on here, and I listened to the conversation between you and David, and I just love the vision that you have with the men with chess. So it's cool to be able to put a face to the name and to be able to meet you virtually.
Yeah, you as well.
Yeah. Well, let's keep going around and bring in Chris. So Chris with the Inklings Variety Hour.
Chris
We have
Pipkin.
not
Hey, buddy.
met, but
Hey, how are y'all doing? Oh,
Good.
Now
sorry.
that you're in the room.
I know. Yeah, so I'm the Inklings Variety Hour guy, basically. Father of four, husband of one. I write, I'm a professor, a medievalist. Actually, part of the reason that I became a medievalist was because of the work of Lewis and Tolkien. And I wanted to kind of follow them into the world that they knew so well. With in terms of the podcast, I'd been following a lot of literary podcasts and enjoying them. While there were lots of literary podcasts about individual Inklings, lots of really excellent ones, such as Pints with Jack and others.
And everybody else.
I wanted one about the Inklings in general, and about kind of Inklings adjacent authors as well. So I wanted a nice broad podcast that could cover like Charles Williams and Tolkien and Lewis kind of indiscriminately and with very little discipline, and couldn't find one, so I decided to do it. It's been fun. I started it with two other co-hosts who have since just had other life priorities that have taken them away from the podcast. Have really enjoyed kind of trying to hit that sweet spot between substantial scholarly discussion of the Inklings and morning radio talk show. So I feel like mission accomplished for the most part.
You're hitting it. I sure had a great time on there with you.
Oh man, yeah. Andrew on to talk Till We Have Faces. We did like 12 episodes on Till We Have, not just with Andrew, but he came on once or twice for Till We Have Faces. David came on for Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and both were just so much fun.
Out here, Chris.
Please come on, Matt. I am always
Just kidding.
like I'm constantly trying to bring people in to host. Any of you are welcome anytime to come on the Variety Hour.
Chris, I've been listening to your show lately. I love the stuff on Charles Williams since he's
Sweet.
Forgotten. Yeah, it's been great. I've been just going through all those episodes. I love it.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Thanks so much. It always shocks me when I like hear from people who are actually listening. I'm like, oh my gosh, this isn't just something I'm making for myself.
If you're a podcaster and you also think this, please raise your hand.
Literally, I'm constantly shocked.
Hey, Chris, if you haven't gotten a hold of Paul Fittis yet at Oxford University,
Okay.
he's got that new book on Charles Williams. It's $170 or something. I mean, it's a ridiculous academic press book, but he was one of the keynotes at the Romania C.S. Lewis and Kindred Spirits
Oh,
Conference. He came
I-
in, but he did it live via Zoom, and he's super friendly. And
is
so-
that why your beard is like that?
No, no.
Is it a Romanian priest thing?
No, it's not. I'm just trying to hide my.
I love it. It's an. I am so envious of that beard. Very cool. How was
work on Williams?
How was Yosh, by the way?
Josh was
Because
fantastic. And maybe we'll do Yeah.
No, go
it
ahead.
was-
Sorry.
It was amazing, and Denise Vasiliou and her family do an incredible job. I recommend it to anyone who can go. But we got a lot of friends on this podcast, on this live stream, so we need to keep going around.
Yeah,
the
sorry.
horn. No worries.
Well, beautiful. Let's introduce Phil and Daniel, who out of all of these are the first ones that I had met. David and I very, very early on into this journey at the conference in Montreat. So first of all, it's good to see you, Phil and Daniel, again. How are you guys doing? Introduce yourself. Talk about the Lamppost Listener.
And
Yeah,
actually, these guys, you met them live at Montreat, and then I met them live at Mere Anglicanism. So I think this
That's
is
right.
the
Yeah,
first
that's right.
that we met in person before we met on podcasts. So hey, fellas.
right. We're very tangible people. We're physically there.
You know, we've been spending a lot of time in the last battle talking about the metaphysical, right? And discussing, even with you, Andrew, what it means, right, to be in person. And so it's funny. I think, David, you're the first person for the Pints Drac that we actually ever met online before we met in person. Because Matt, you and Andrew, we met y'all in person first, which is kind of crazy. But
that's right.
yeah, I'm Daniel. This is Phil. Next to me, we are the host of the Lamppost Listener. We have been going through for 6 years almost now, through the Chronicles of Narnia, and wrapping up the last battle. And so, yeah, David and Matt, we started about just 6 months after y'all, and have kind of been have enjoyed doing this alongside y'all for quite a bit of time now. Phil, what else should we add to that?
I am really grateful that David started first, because David really pushes us to make a better show. We see y'all's fan base growing and the quality of your show, and you're ahead of us on the technology side of things. Using the streaming and Riverside and everything is really great too. So I'm also amazed at how welcoming everyone is. We've had so many guests just say yes to coming on the show or inviting us onto their show. And Sean, we really enjoyed working with y'all and look forward to doing this again. And it's a great community. I'm always surprised by when you find people who are truly interested in something, and they're all just excited about it. Everyone's very willing to share and just take part in the thing that gives them joy.
Phil, for the record, David pushes Matt and me to make it a better skill as well. I'm not sure how effective it is, but it's certainly.
You've heard of the
Daniel
simile,
are-
like herding cats. That's mine.
The episode hasn't been released yet, but we were interviewing Diana Glyer, Andrew and I, and David was not with us. And there was a bit of technical difficulties for the first 5 minutes. And Diana, without missing a beat, says, and unfortunately this was not recorded, says, well, I kind of allocated a little time in the beginning because David wasn't here, so I figured it'd be less organized. I was like, ooh, the reputation precedes us.
Actually, that just dropped today, right, David?
Yeah, I just listened to that this morning.
Oh, really?
Thanks for keeping up, Matt.
Clearly, I don't listen to our own podcast. Well, beautiful. Well, one final thing, Phil and Daniel, you'll be pleased to know, since we met in person, I have now read every Narnia book except The Last Battle. So, you know,
Me too.
That's the last one.
Yeah, Phil as well.
Just do me a favor and wait 3 more weeks.
Before you tell him anything.
I need this.
God, I think we are going to be recording in about 5 weeks on that one, so I do need to start reading it now.
We got a date on the books, and Dr. Kristen Ditchfield Lazo Major will be coming on and doing that.
Beautiful.
Well, we haven't yet welcomed Sean Stevenson-Douglas.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, good to see some faces of I haven't met anybody here in person, and unfortunately my co-host Jordan, he's not here right now. He would have been the only one in the crowd who I can actually, confirm their corporal to, but good to see all these guys. I've listened to lots of your shows. Really a lot of fun.
Sean, could you tell
And,
the
yeah,
people
Jordan
viewing
and
a
I,
little bit
we-
about your show?
Everybody viewing already knows about our show. I'm sure, I imagine we're the favorite in the room, so I don't know why I would have to explain that, but no, just teasing.
Go ahead and mute him now.
Yeah,
David.
Jordan Duncan and I, we went to college together, and we were just reconnecting. I'm the president of a small Bible college here in Saskatchewan, Canada. Hence the thick accent. And I was driving, and I was just talking to Jordan one day on the phone, and there was just this moment of beautiful kind of overlap where we were both discovering the essays of C.S. Lewis independently and had no one else to talk to about it. And I've now heard this a couple of times. It sounds like a lot of our podcasts or shows were generated out of listening to either other similar shows and saying, well, but there's this one niche that we don't feel like has been covered in a few episodes here and there. So we said, what about the essays of Lewis, and what about some of his letters, which we've just been broaching now? And you know, that was whatever it was, 18 months and 3 seasons ago, and we've pumped out. I was just trying to count, actually, I'm not sure, but just short of 100 episodes, I think we're at now, and it's been a lot of fun. We, like I said, we typically would read a one essay or letter of Lewis's per episode and discuss it. And again, another thing that I've heard a little bit too is trying to strike that the farthest thing from Lewis scholars. Well, maybe not the farthest thing from Lewis scholars. There's probably somebody out there who's like Twilight Saga or something like that, and we're not that. But we're just
Swift.
like happy amateurs to be in the room and have a great excuse to read Lewis's work and return to it week after week. We love it.
Sean, I got to jump in here as the ranking C.S. Lewis scholar in the room, and I love your phrase, happy amateur. And so if I am a Lewis scholar, I'm just a happier amateur because I get to spend more time on that. And every Lewis scholar I know is an amateur, is a lover of Lewis. And to be able to incorporate that at all into our professional or our ministerial life is just a joy. And I'm so looking forward to coming on. We're going to do Myth Became Fact in a couple of weeks. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Yep. The season that we're working through right now is just all of C.S. Lewis's perspective on myth and fiction and poetry and whatnot. So I'm really looking forward to having you, Andrew. It'll be great.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
And Jordan Duncan is in the chat, and he says it's 62 episodes.
Oh, of course he is. Jordan is the real brains. I was like, Jordan,
Jordan's
are you
the
sure you want
David.
me? He's in the chat, but he's not in the conversation. What's wrong with this guy?
Hey, Chris, you just popped somebody up. Who you got there? And I want to know what the rest of y'all are drinking. I mean, I'm two-fisting it here. I want to know what you all are drinking.
Yeah, so this is Arthur Edmund Pipkin. He is 6 months old.
Hi,
But
Arthur.
yeah, he's a pretty sociable guy, so I thought I'd let him hang out.
I love it.
Just on the drinking front, I am drinking VAT 69, which Walter Hooper went and got for Lewis at one point. This is my last bottle that I brought back from England several years ago. So, your good health.
Yes.
I'm going.
We should drink
Macallan
to
12
Jack,
sherry
everybody.
cask.
What are you drinking, Matt?
Actually, let's just go around the other drinks, and then we'll do a toast.
Okay. I'm drinking Lagavulin 16 and a pint of Guinness, both in pints with Jack glasses.
The only one.
Matt?
I'm Macallan 12, the sherry cask.
Okay, call on somebody now, Matt.
Well, Kyle, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking coffee.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's funny. I drink good bourbon and beer and all sorts of things on late night shows, but I have coffee right now. I feel kind of lame. Sorry.
Great. Call somebody out, Kyle.
Joseph, how about you?
I've got some Jameson Black Barrel Irish whiskey in honor of Jim. Normally, I'm a bourbon
Okay,
guy.
but Jack would have been a Bushmills guy, right?
I
Isn't
should have
Jameson
did
for the South?
Bushmills.
I just went with the Irish thing, you know.
There you go.
Sounds like something I'd
Lovely.
say.
Call somebody out, Joseph.
Phil.
Yeah, I'm drinking a lemon lime Waterloo. This is 12 ounces. David, that's about 355 milliliters.
Thank you. It's good to know. It's good to know that the designated driver of the Lamppost listener is exact and accommodating to people from other parts of the world.
He calls them Mills. I think.
This is actually this is true that he is the designated driver for the show. I'm actually at work right now. My wife's at home with the 2 kids, so I decided to do this from here. So no alcohol for me. I'm just drinking some black tea, but I have some Eagle Rare whiskey when I get home to pour out in honor of Jack. So
But what kind
just
of black tea?
30 minutes or so from now.
What kind of
It
black
is
tea?
this is awful. It is the black tea because there's no all of the things in our faculty lounge here at the school I work at. Everything's shut down because here on the East Coast it's 7:30. So this is out of a Keurig, which is not good black tea. It was just I wanted
Wow.
something with some caffeine, but
Yep.
everything else is
Classic.
closed. I'm probably one of the.
Destroy
There's
the
only
Mute 'em
probably
now,
2 or 3
David.
other faculty members.
Okay. How about you, Bob? What are you drinking?
I'm not drinking.
Oh man.
Sorry.
Is
We'll
there
drink
anyone
for
else that's
ya.
got anything interesting before we cheers?
Steve
I've
is
just
also
got a
drinking,
slight. I finished
some-
it. I totally forgot about this tradition, but I was drinking my they call it tourist chai, my Turkish tea out of my tulip shaped glass is what I like to have in the evening.
Nice.
I just
Well,
I
think
want to
that-
know what the baby's drinking.
Mainly
what the
mainly
baby's
milk.
drinking.
You know,
Shocker. Okay.
some formula. He's surprisingly versatile in terms of milk versus formula. So
Well, I think that we too can toast to the professor because Jack was made a professor in 1954, 55. And so on his birthday, to Jack.
To Jack.
Jack.
The Jack.
Jack.
Okay, this is a good pivot point. Now, in the agenda, I had everybody sort of drop off and join, and everybody came, and that's awesome. So, thank you all for being here. I wanted to give away
So I
some
don't have
books.
to leave.
You don't have to leave.
Awesome.
So, again, this is a section of some of the books that we're giving away. There is a complete on the Pints with Jack website if you go and have a look for this year. And so how many people have we got on? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'm going to get the computer to pick out 11 names. I will email you after the live stream and you can tell me what you would like out of the list. So the 11 names are Dave Bunch, Daniel Seaman, Joelle Lowe, Susan Everett, Christina Paustian, John Magnotti. Oh, the dog's upset that he hasn't got any. Steve Clancy, Hope, Kedrick Webster, and Susan Hippard. Wonderful. So all of you are winners of books. Congrats. I will be in touch, and you can email me which out of the list you would like. Well, with that, let's pivot to the general discussions. We've got a handful of questions.
We're talking about books. I wanted to show you what my current project is. I've been working on the timeline of Joy Davidman and C.S. Lewis's first meeting, and everybody gets it wrong. And so what I'm doing now, I just ordered a bunch of books on eBay and A-Libris and all the rest. I am trying to track down and get every single biography and every edition of the biographies because they make mistakes and I want to see where the mistakes creep in and who's grabbing from who else. So there are three different versions of the Roger Lancelin Green and Walter Hooper biography. I've got the other one on the floor. There's three different versions of And God Came In or A Love Observed. And so talking to books, I need another whole nother shelf just so that I can get every biography. So what are you all reading currently of Lewis's?
Well, actually, let's pivot into the first question,
sure.
Matt.
Sorry, of course.
No, it would be awesome to have each of you share either a favorite Lewis quotation and why, or just tell us a little bit about what Lewis means to you. And let's start with Kyle because you were the first person on the stream. So,
oh sure. Well, I was really overwhelmed by this question because there's just so many. But I mean, of course, since I get to go first, so it's really easy. I get to say Further Up and Further In, which summarizes Lewis's whole approach to reality. But Further Up and Further In. But then I decided to go to Abolition of Man with a quote. He says on page 77. For the wise men of old, the cardinal problem had been how to conform the soul to reality. But for now, for magic and applied sciences or scientism, alike the problem is how to subdue reality to the wishes of men. And so for me, it's like, if you're conforming yourself to reality, that's further up and further into transcendent reality to our Lord Himself. But whether you're into neo-paganism, like many today, or scientism, that's all about manipulating and controlling reality. And so Lewis, of course, is a prophet, always pushing us into what it means to be fully human, which it means to be conformed to Christ's image.
Pun intended. That was very nice.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't lose your head.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Let's go with Chris next.
Yeah, I also found the question quite overwhelming, and had like 2 minutes after dropping to come up with something. But the thing that I love about Lewis, when I fiction, right? When I watch, even when I read historical fiction, a lot of times they will read events in the past with the lens of the present, and Lewis does exactly the opposite. He will give you fresh fantasies, right? He will give you compelling fiction, but he does it as someone who knows the past from the inside out. And that, I think, is what so many of us tend to be so attracted to about him. It's the secret thread that holds together, I think, his scholarship, his essays, even his Christianity and his fantasy. And that's really one of the things I love most about C.S. Lewis.
And before we move on to the next individual, listeners that are watching us live, feel free to start submitting questions into the chat if you have any, because we will circle back to these near the end. So now is the time to start dropping them in. If someone says something that you want to expand more, or someone says something that intrigues you, just feel free to drop that in. Stephen, let's go to you.
Or makes wild claims about till we have faces.
Of course, my favorite Lewis quote is the part where he says, "You are not a soul. You have a soul. You have a body." However that is. That's only slightly more canonical than the my dear Wormwood. Be sure your patient remains fixated on politics. I saw someone on Twitter that actually posted that made it into someone's print book at some point. Past rudimentary fact checking there. Okay, so big question, of course, especially because Lewis wore so many hats. Scholar, apologetics, fairy tale writer. I particularly like the Screw Tape Letters, of course, Lewis the satirist. But one thing that comes to mind is Lewis the self-aware creator. Just for anyone, any Christian who's wanting to emulate Lewis in how he made fiction and how he made fairy tales. I particularly love his quote from it's actually from his essay, "Sometimes fairy stories may say best what's to be said."
Oh, Walter,
and
what a bad title.
And when I was younger, I think, like many Christians, would particularly like where Lewis would seem to pummel this idea of the people, or the panel of experts sitting around a table thinking, "Gentlemen, we must come up with a way to write stories for children. Let us hammer out allegories to embody them." And Lewis said, "Well, this is pure moonshine. I couldn't write that way at all." And how I used to hear this explained was, well, Lewis just went off on a flight of fancy and he came up with these images, and then he made a story, and then whatever Christianity is in there just kind of got in there by accident. And at some point, I'm ashamed to say I may have argued that myself. But if you actually go and read the essay, cumbersome title and all, Lewis is far more methodical about it. He says, "Okay, I started off with the author, the bubbling of images and inspiration, the fawn in the woods, and then the lion came bounding in and all that." And then Lewis said, "But I had to give them form. I had to limit these somehow." So they had to have a particular genre. So I settled on the fairy tale with its brevity, and it seemed the ideal form for the stuff I had to say. And then Lewis does say, and I was shocked about this, that after these first two stages, as he defines them, then comes the man or the citizen. Like Lewis now comes along and says, "Okay, I've got the imagination. Now I've got the form. Now what purpose is this going to have?" And then Lewis says, "Okay, so I started thinking," this is the part where he's thinking, "Okay, maybe I do need to say something about Christianity to children. I need to sneak past those watchful dragons and the Sunday school associations." And so I discovered that the place where a lot of Christian creators start is where Lewis finished. Like he only put that on top once he'd already finished with the bubbling of images and the form. So that really helps me, and I think it helps many other creators looking at how Lewis did it rather than just trying to copy how he did it without understanding the how and the why.
I love
Nice.
that. Before we go to Sean, I've got to say I've been enjoying William O'Flaherty's comments in the comment box.
Yes, hardships often come to those who falsely attribute quotes to Lewis.
Oh,
That's
my
great.
thanks to Mr. Flaherty. Yes, he's good at myth busting those. I hope we cancel the guy who came up with that fixation on politics quote in particular.
Yeah, I just
That's-
tagged
God
him
bless him.
in a questionable post today.
Oh,
Who's next?
Sean.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm just going to echo this. I think for me, probably my favorite C.S. Lewis quote comes out of the last work that I read of his. Almost every time I feel like I'm snagged on something that he says that just takes me deeper into something else that I've read of his. One of the things that I've enjoyed so much about going into the essays, as I come back to his better known works, you come to the Space Trilogy, to Screwtape, to Narnia especially, and you just really see how Lewis in his fiction creates a world where his myth, so to speak, because this is the theme we're on right now, right? His myth shows the truth that he tells you in his essays. And then his essays tell you the truth that he's trying to show you in his myth. And I absolutely just love that. So what happens is I'm constantly stuck on, I'm just whatever I most recently read. But I want to actually respond to Chris a little bit because my other comment was exactly that Lewis, he breaks us out of, what does he call it? Chronological snobbery, I think, somewhere, of that idea that whatever the modern ideas, the contemporary ideas, must be somehow more progressed than the ancient one. And so I was reviewing on Living on an Atomic Age, which is my at least current favorite essay of his for a number of different reasons. But he says right at the top of the essay, after he just dismantles the idea that we're living in a unique time because we're facing an existential threat, he says, this is normal humanity, guys. This is normal humanity. And I love that Lewis does that. And that's why I continue to get my students to read him, because he does it so flawlessly. But he says, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty, and then just goes in to describe how utterly dangerous living in this world as a human being has been in every century. And so just really, really appreciate that. And from fiction, I'll throw this out too. So now I'm cheating. I'm giving you 3 or 4 answers, but from fiction, and because it's not a lesser known quote either, it's the famous Reepicheep one, where Reepicheep is just talking about perseverance and grit. And Joseph, you know, that Men with Chess, that project that you are on, I'm going to have to start to listen to your podcast. I haven't listened to it yet. I'm glad to be exposed to it tonight. But this for me really sums up a piece of that I strive for and pray for with the emerging generation, is that this kind of same pursuit and grip that Reepicheep has, where he says, while I can, I sail east in the dawn treader. When she fails me, I paddle east in my coracle. When she sinks, I shall swim east with my 4 paws. And when I can swim no longer, if I've not reached Aslan's country or shot over the edge of the world into some vast cataract, I shall sink with my nose to the sunrise. Again, I know it's just a common one, well worn, but it's well worn for a good reason.
Yes. Cheers
I love
to that for sure.
Yes. Robert, how about yourself?
I'll pass.
All right. Joseph.
Yeah, so each episode I end with a quote from chapter 1 of The Abolition of Man. And that's got to be my go-to here. And the quote is, as a king governs by his executive, so reason and man must rule the mere appetites by means of the spirited element. The chest, magnanimity, sentiment, these are the indispensable liaison officers between cerebral man and visceral man. It may even be said that it is by this middle element that man is man. For by his intellect he is mere spirit, and by his appetite mere animal. And Kyle, we're going to have to do an episode together, because what you're talking about was exactly the kind of stuff that, I think Abolition of Man is so good at explaining, how you have that well-ordered soul working properly. So that's my favorite quote, and that's why I end each episode with it. And I leave out the part where he mentions Alanus, the medieval French theologian, simply because I know no one knows who Alanus is. So any fact checkers out there, William O'Flaherty, that's why he's out.
By the way, Mary Margaret is on the YouTube and she is drinking sparkling rosé. So if you don't know, Mary Margaret is Matt's new girlfriend. So I'm cheersing to her right now.
Cheers to Mary Margaret.
David, you're muted if you're trying to talk, David.
Yes,
David
you're
Bates,
muted.
You're muted. Oh, he's saying that Andrew is actually
No,
right
I'm not.
about Till We Have
Shush.
Faces.
Shush. I said everybody wave at Mary Margaret. And Mary Margaret, would you mind letting us know if anything has arrived at your office recently? Because Andrew and I sent you a present.
We did, but then it got canceled and then it's resent. So it's coming.
Okay. Look out for a present.
Yes.
I did not know this. You guys are upstaging
You don't need
me
to
already.
know.
Yeah. We weren't sending it to you. How about someone from the Lamppost listener? And you are allowed to quote something other than Narnia.
Well, I want to quote Narnia because I was thinking when there's so many people here, I'd like to quote something a little bit shorter as well too. And anyone who's been following us this season knows that I've talked a lot. Sean and Jordan know this especially. I've been going back reading a lot about talking about bicycles, which is this wonderful essay. Yeah, Andrew and I, we talked about this because you were taking it with you to your re-enchantment conference, right?
Well, and it was because of your comment that I based my whole talk on that essay. And so,
I'll be looking for the check in the mail. That's wonderful to hear.
Keep looking.
So one of the things that we're focused on is particularly for Phil and I, as we look at this transcendent truth that we find in classic works of children's literature. I love this line that we hear from Hwin in The Horse and His Boy. It's just 2 sentences here. Well, really 3 sentences here that she says to Aslan when she first meets him. She says, "Please, you're so beautiful. You may eat me if you like. I'd sooner be eaten by you than fed by anyone else."
Yes.
And especially for me, as someone who's been in the world of classical Christian education for the last decade or so, thinking especially about how we communicate truth, objective truth to the next generation of students, of human beings, right? I think one of the things that I love so much about Lewis is that he's able to communicate things in that early stage of enchantment that he talks about in that essay from the 40s, where if there's these 4 stages of enchantment that we go through, and most of us are living either in disenchantment or re-enchantment, right, as adults. Well, a lot of the reality that we experience around us actually begins in the stage of enchantment, which often happens in those earliest years of our lives, right after we've gone through the stage of just simply being unenchanted. About in this writing on that he has about bicycles, that you're enchanted when you realize that riding the bicycle is the secret to life, right? But then eventually become disenchanted and hopefully eventually re-enchanted. And I think this line by Hwin saying, "I'd rather be eaten by you than fed by anyone else," helps us, and especially helps younger readers, right? A 6 or 7-year-old can even begin to understand the atmosphere of this, as Lewis often wrote in his works and his academic works. The atmosphere of this is a kind of fearful love that fully understands the hierarchy between the divine and their creation. And without having all of that language, right, a 7-year-old can read that and be like, "Oh, wow, I feel that." Right. Yeah. Lewis was never afraid of feelings in kind of the postmodern sense, but more of the fact that feelings can be used, if they're kept in the right place, to help us unlock that transcendent truth, right, that God has given us. And so I think this perfect little line here by Lewis, which might even just feel like a throwaway line the first time you read it, simply allows us to see the just genius of this writer.
Yeah. It echoes that line in Surprised by Joy, that the hardness of God is softer than the kindness of men. And I'd love to hear from Kyle, especially because I love what you pointed out, Daniel, that when Lewis drops these ideas in, I think that he's evangelizing for good and later reading. And so
Mhm.
when we read the patristics, or when we read, Hamlet, or whatever it is, Lewis, I think, is an apologist for the faith, but an evangelist for the reading process as a way to access truth. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to pitch it over to Kyle.
Yeah, what's the question again? To make sure.
Favorite Lewis quote.
Oh, a favorite Lewis quote? I think I answered that, but
Oh, did you? Okay, so
I did
sorry.
abolition of
Then I don't
man
wanna-
earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
zillion quotes that I would love to share.
Well, and I don't want to.
Another.
I don't want to short.
I'll
anybody.
dominate the whole stream.
Well, actually,
I
just
think we
before,
got a screen full of those. Yeah.
just before, I want to move on to another question, but I was listening to the Lamppost Listener this morning, and Daniel mentioned that he had an alternative reading order. As we all know, all right-thinking people go with publication order, and I'm still
Yes.
battling people online about that.
Yes.
Daniel, so you got publication order, chronological order,
Sure.
starting order. What's your order?
So recently, I do a little bit of work on teaching Lewis in both professional and parochial settings as well too. Not just, it's weird. We started out as Narnia novices, and somehow this has snowballed into something a little bit bigger than that, despite any any of our best efforts. And so one of the things that I was working on is some curriculum development, especially in kind of later lower school years for those of us in classical Christian education movement. And in my particular school, we are now reading all 7 books, between 3rd through 6th grade. And as kind of the Lewis guy on campus, I was asked to kind of oversee this project. And as we were looking through this, I would have just gone straight up with publication, but I was looking at the way that we do some of our curriculum. And for us, our 4th graders focus on quests as they actually read Beowulf, and they get into a lot of medieval history. In 5th grade, we have students look at European exploration and into colonial America. And in 6th grade, we look at where we eventually get, as we study in history, we go all the way through the 20th century. And so with a fear, as you mentioned, Sean, of the destruction of our world through the atomic age, right? And so as we were thinking through this, it didn't quite make sense for us to go in publication order. But of course, I couldn't do chronological order, because I do obviously believe that fundamentally alters one's reading experience.
Sure.
And so what we actually came up with, well, I'll say 2 things real quick. The first is that I feel a little bit less strong about this issue than I once did. If you go back and listen, 5-6 years ago to the early episodes of the show, we said it had to be done this way. And while I do think that reading in publication order is the best way to read it, I kind of, at this point, in my old age, I've just waned a little bit and find myself more taking the side of, well, as long as you don't read Magician's Nephew first, and as long as you don't read, as long as you read Last Battle last, you'll probably be okay. But what we've done is we've actually paired off each of the books. So we have our 3rd graders reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as the entry point to the series, and then actually reading The Magician's Nephew. So going right into the prequel right after that. We then pick it up in 4th grade as students are reading about medieval history, and we see some of the Arabian Nights come into The Horse and His Boy. We actually read The Horse and His Boy 3rd. So they see the kings and queens of Narnia before they've actually returned to Narnia. And then we also go into Prince Caspian with that very chivalric, or that Martian influence that Dr. Ward talks about too. We're thinking about Mars Sylvanus and both the woods and also the martial imagery. And then as we look at European exploration, we read The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and then we get into The Silver Chair. Especially in 5th grade, we want our students to see protagonists who change over time. So you get to see Eustace's journey throughout both of those books. And then as we look at the very potentially, right, as many modernists and postmodernists do, we think of, the 20th century must have been the end of the world. We actually look at, what does the actual eschaton look like? Because it probably is not as bad, as Sean was mentioning, as we tend to think it is. Not that there weren't horrific things that occurred in the 20th century, there absolutely were, but often our ability to kind of point to something and say, this is the worst thing, actually shows kind of our historical ignorance more than anything else. And so The Last Battle gives our students an idea of, what do the end times actually look like? What's the atmosphere? Not what is the XYZ exactly how it's going to happen. So that's been the way we've done it. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Magician's Nephew, Horse and His Boy, Prince Caspian, Dawn Treader's Silver Chair, and Last Battle. And I know that you're never going to come back on our show or allow me to come on Pints with Jack anymore, but that's how it is now at my school.
We're holding open auditions.
If you really
for
wanted to go
podcast
meta,
co-host.
if you really wanted to go meta and in media race, you would start with Horse and His Boy, and then Magician's Nephew was composed last, finished last.
That's right.
So that might be. Well, let's whip around the room real quick. I know we have a room full of podcasters, so I'm going to ask for one-word answers or one-title answers. I want to whip around the room, and I want to know what your lesser-known or more obscure Lewis favorite recommend is. And so let's not do Lewis's second best book, The Great Divorce. Let's not do Mere Christianity, Screwed Tape, Till We Have Faces, Narnia. So lesser known work, it can be a book or it can be an essay or it can be, a series of letters. And I'm just going to go in the order I got them on my screen. Chris, lesser known Lewis work.
The Discarded Image.
Yeah, here. David, how about you?
The Problem with X.
Oh, yeah, good. Kyle?
I'll just go with Paralandra. Did you hear me?
Yeah, Andrew's frozen.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I missed it. It froze for me. What did Kyle say?
Oh, I said Paralandra. Yeah.
Okay, come on. Something more obscure than that.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. All right. Matt? Everything.
I was going to say, I haven't read anything obscure of Lewis's. Seriously, actually.
You've heard good things
Matt
about
is
the Lost Battle.
undiscovered country. How about you, Stephen?
This is a timely one from the God in the Dock essay collection. Lewis's satirical essay, Xmas and Christmas.
Yes. Nyatirb.
Nyatirb, yes. The
Andrew.
weird residents of Nyatirb celebrating Xmas as opposed to Christmas.
He wrote that the same year that he wrote Till We Have Faces, and that's part of why I flipped the names around. Okay, Sean.
I already said On Living in an Atomic Age, but I will
Great.
just say that we refer back on our show to the essay Membership, probably
Yes.
more than any other single essay.
Good. All right.
Is that the same thing as the Inner Ring?
No, it comes next,
Oh,
but it's not.
okay.
Bob, how
Well,
about
I'll
you?
say
A
Inner
lesser
Ring.
known Lewis book.
I don't know.
I got one for you.
Oh,
The George MacDonald
Of course, of
anthology.
course.
Yeah.
Joseph.
I'm also going Discarded Image.
Oh, no, it's already been used. Something else.
Then I'll go Studies in Words.
Oh, very
okay.
nice. I thought you were going to go Studies in Medieval and Renaissance Literature, which is good. Phil.
Yeah, you eliminated everything for George MacDonald's quotations that C.S. Lewis put together. So that's the only one I have left.
That was the anthology, yeah.
We got it. All right. Daniel.
Yeah, already talking about bicycles, so I'll say Letter to a Former Pupil from 1941, one of my favorite of his letters.
Is that called?
I'm trying to be the most obscure here.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the one he writes to one of his former pupils who's made the decision to become a Christian. And he says, congratulations on your own decision. He gives the student some advice on what it exactly is that this student should do next now that he is a Christian.
Okay. I think I've got one that none of you all have. Poetry and Prose in the 16th Century.
Oh, I love that book.
Oh.
Andrew.
This is actually a republication of the Oh Hell. Do you have it? Oh, you've got it. No, is that
Some
the
great,
Australian?
Busted
No, it's
reading there.
English. It's the Oh Hell. Yeah.
Yeah.
So different.
But I think the Oh Hell is so wonderful, and the writing is scintillatingly good. And actually, I thought that I was the first to discover this, but of course, Michael Ward goes before us all. So, Michael, And the name Puddleglum comes up in the Oxford History of English Literature. And that book and Preface to Paradise Lost have recently been republished. So they're brand new covers, and you can get it. And they're actually on iBooks and virtual books as well.
Wow.
So great. Matt?
All right. So I'm hesitating of how to phrase this because we're overrunning on time, and this is actually a deep question. So maybe if people have strong feelings, it's a really good answer, they can jump in, not to put pressure on this. But how has Lewis, for the Pints with Jack podcast, we talk about discovering the truth and beauty of Christianity through the lens of C.S. Lewis. And I think he'd love to appreciate the ways that his works has drawn us further up and further into a more intimate relationship with Christ. So I'm just curious, some of you, of just how Lewis, whether he's formed some new theological concept, whether his works have just how they've brought you closer to Christ.
I'll go first. I'll say, as I often do, that when I was a child, Lewis sparked my imaginative life. But when I became a man, he saved my intellectual life. He taught me how to read, he taught me how to think, and he's brought everything good that I have in my life. Chris.
Yeah, man, I don't know how to follow that. Yeah, I mean, I'd say generally, you know, in a lot of corners of Christianity, people who think a lot sometimes find themselves exiting, and I'm, you know, fairly certain this would have happened to me if I hadn't been reading C.S. Lewis as a teenager, as a young adult. But he gets reduced so often, I think, to a defender of orthodoxy, which he certainly is. But what I think that can miss is that his orthodoxy runs very, very deep, right? That it's that robust orthodoxy that delights us in his imaginative works, right? So that you know, there's a substance there, you know, that we encounter in Aslan, for instance, right, or in The God of the Mountain, or you know, or other works that that draw us. They do draw us into imagination. They draw us into fairy, but they also bring us to the one who created human nature, that has created in turn those places of, you know, of fairy or Narnia or whatever else. So
fantastic. Yeah. I love that phrase, a robust orthodoxy. Incidentally, my bishop, Bishop Justin Holcomb, is a professor at Reformed Theological Seminary, and a couple of his colleagues just did a book called The Great Dechurching. And what they found is, of the 40 million people who have left the church, 97% of people with master's degrees have not dechurched. And so I think that throws the door wide open to the thoughtful faith that C.S. Lewis provides. What about you, David?
Well, I'm going to wave Dr. Stephen Beebe's book at the camera.
Yes.
And I would say Lewis he constantly challenges me to make sure that I'm communicating clearly. Because that is what he does best, better than anyone else. And that communication both involves communicating information, but also in a way that doesn't just feed your mind, but feeds your imagination. Yeah. And he famously said that he thought that there should be a final class at every seminary where the candidates for graduation had to translate some theology so that it could be communicated to the everyday man. And if they can't do that, then they can't graduate. And I think that's a great standard, personally. Yeah. When my son is Pope, this will be the new standard in the Catholic Church. I can promise you that. But just in our role as podcasters, this is what I'm always striving for, and I always feel like Jack is at my back, pushing me to try and be better.
Yeah. You know, as a recently graduated seminarian, Lewis is the only one who helps me do that. Kyle, what about you?
Oh, well, he challenges me in so many areas. I love eschatology, and I think his hope of heaven challenges me. He had a view of heaven that was grounded in reality, and that it wasn't detached or arbitrary. It meant that it would transform reality right now. And so he really kind of counterbalances, theologians who were trying to get away from an eschatology that looks far off. But for him, he could unite, Aslan's country with Narnia. And so he transferred my view of eschatology, which was wonderful, and then also my understanding of what it means to be a human, and theosis and deification. When he talks about that we can be
My
dazzling
favorite.
goddesses, he sounds borderline heretical, but yet he's pushing deeper into what Christianity is. And so, yeah, he definitely played a role in saving my faith, my understanding of what it means to be a human.
That's great. Randy Alcorn, who wrote that wonderful book,
Say.
Heaven. Yeah, Bob.
Well, what he has helped me with a lot, I think, is his view of hierarchy, his view of the complementarians of the sexes, the view of tradition, the elevation of language. So I grew up not in I grew up Presbyterian. Then I went to a Bible church. Then in college, kind of under the tutelage of Tom Howard, I became an Episcopalian, and then I became a Catholic. And the liturgy is so rich that I think without the preparation of the imagination, I would not be able to worship as I do. And that's what he's given to me.
Ah, fantastic. Sean, how about you? Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Lewis has been there, just to echo actually your own sentiments, Andrew. Like through childhood, he formed me in a way that I wouldn't have been able to articulate. I lived in Turkey for a number of years, hence the teacups. And when I was coming back and I was taking this posting at the college here, this is a Pentecostal school. And when I was in Turkey, I spent quite a bit of time in the Eastern Orthodox Church. I was attending an Eastern Orthodox church, and Kyle, I'm very fascinated. I wish that we could have maybe a separate conversation about a few of the comments that you've made, because I was starting to discover that the patristics in that time, and then I did my master's degree, and I'm learning all of these kinds of things. And when I got back, I read a book called Thinking in Tongues by James Smith, which is just maybe one of I'll just admit, for those of you who are very that the Pentecostal stream isn't always known for its level of thought. Now, what does this have to do with Lewis? Lewis, as several of us have already said, he baptized our imaginations, and then he taught us how to think rationally as well, without real discord between the two.
Yeah.
And I think that he continues to do that for me. Like I need my imagination to be well tuned by his stories and other good stories as well. But by good stories, that's really true. But I find that actually, this is I'm stealing this from somebody said, I don't remember, but they say your heart can take you places your head can't go. But I know that when my head has a problem that my heart can't solve, that it almost becomes a little bit like an anchor. And Lewis just seemed to align both of those for me so well, not only on the level of faith, which I think a lot of us are talking about, but to David's point, every time I read Lewis, it re-highlights to me how important thinking well changes a life. So I just say all that to say, I was reading James Smith in that transition time of coming back to this place and putting all these pieces together, really discovering the Ante-Nicene Church and how that can affect us here. And I found in Lewis, oh man, he's really been there before me, and he's really given me a way to walk in all these different streams really well. And at the end, he says it much more simply than I just rambled on for 3 minutes. He says, I am a mere Christian.
Yeah.
And the mereness of his Christianity, as well as the depth of his faith, has just meant so much to me over the years, and continues to unfold to me as I discover new layers of his literature.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I recently did an interview with Rowan Williams, who says, I can only confess to being repeatedly humbled and reconverted by Lewis in a way that is true of few other modern Christian writers. So, Stephen.
Yeah, I think Kyle
Thanks, Sean.
actually beat me to Lewis's eternal perspective. And then, Andrew, you were about to name check Randy Alcorn a moment ago, from where I get that phrase, eternal perspective. I was curious what your thought was there before I say anything more about Randy
Just
Alcorn.
Randy, who I've had a chance to meet a couple of times, and is in Mere Christians, owes a deep debt to Lewis, which
He
he
does.
constantly acknowledges. And his book Heaven owes a lot to Lewis.
Absolutely. Heaven, of course, being that big book about new heavens and new earth, but it looks better on the cover. Lewis's eternal perspective has been absolutely transformative for me as well. So I echo a lot of what Kyle said. I think the term that comes to mind is Lewis's anthropology. Just his deep and biblical studied view of human nature. Even in his quote, God likes matter, he invented it, which sounds like a made up Lewis quote, but it is legit. And just that emphasis on the earthiness of Jesus. And like so many evangelicals and people from other Christian traditions struggle with that so much, and then they watch a show like The Chosen, like, wow, they show Jesus, like, going out in the woods for a potty break, like, whoa, this is scandalous. And I'm like, I've been there a long time, because Lewis thought about Aslan as a real lion. You could sink your hands in his fur. He actually rolls around in the dirt, and like that is old hat to me, and yet still so many layers to explore, from the finale of the last battle to all of the imagery in the Great Divorce. Like, Lewis emphasizes the future earthiness of heaven. Like, I mean, Randy Alcorn, Andrew, you've seen, he'll talk about Christoplatonism, and yet Lewis at the end of the last battle says, like, this is actually kind of like what Plato was talking about. So I may need to read a little further into that, but the idea of the new creation, the new heavens and new earth being a real place, this earth transformed, has to me its genesis in Lewis's imagery and his arguments.
So good. By the way, I want to shout out Yakov Weinstein, Hebraic Inkling, who mentions transposition in the comments on YouTube, and he's here with us. Phil, want to hear from you.
Yeah, I definitely think that reading Mere Christianity had a massive impact on my faith, especially at a critical time in college. And then I think the silver chair also gave me a way to think about different temptations, and that kind of hating being under the control of some sin. So there have been a lot of really powerful moments from both his fiction and nonfiction work that have been instrumental in my faith.
Well, and I think that ongoing reading of Lewis has that ongoing effect. I find myself constantly, he's constantly fresh. So, Joseph, how about you to finish this off?
Yeah, so the anthropology point that Stephen brought up, very similar. Lewis recognizes the importance of both the body and the soul, and then his understanding of the tripartite soul. So that this idea that we are to have a robust faith that includes both our intellect and our heart, that union between the head and the heart. And then, since that's already kind of been said, to go off that, hope as a virtue and what we are hoping in, that is something that also includes body and soul. So we don't think of hope as a virtue much anymore, at least in the Protestant tradition. And that's a great loss. So hope as a virtue is been such a help that I've learned from Lewis.
And that wonderful formula Lewis has for developing virtue is an action repeated becomes a habit, and a habit repeated becomes a virtue. So let's, especially as we plunge down into Advent season with all of its strife, continue to hope in action and make it a habit and make it a virtue. Matt, close it up.
Yeah, I will piggyback off of what Kyle had mentioned, but expand a little bit on it. He brought up theosis and deification, divinization, that concept. This was from our first season, so this was in 2017. I had never really fully understood the concept, and I think that was a season of my life when my personality is, if there's certain vices or virtues I'm either trying to get rid of or develop, it's like, all right, let's read the book Atomic Habits, let's diagnosis, let's do internal healing, all this stuff. And none of these things are bad. Like, I love the Huberman podcast. None of this stuff is bad. But when you when you actually understand that Christ is forming within you, when you participate in the sacramental life, and you don't need to necessarily overthink all of this stuff. It's like just that good infection, enter into relation with him through these sacred rhythms, through the sacraments, through belief, bread, baptism, as he says. It's like Christ, this work is happening. So it's not trying to discount some of the stuff that you can do from the intellectual perspective and diving in, but that concept was probably one of the most transformational concepts for me. So I, to this day, love that. And then I guess I'll do one little mini shout out to the concept of thy will be done. I just thought that's from the Great Divorce, his best work.
That's Daddy.
And oh, hello.
Hello, little one.
Hi.
Introduce
that?
yourself.
Joseph, is that?
It's her bedtime. She wanted to say goodnight.
Who is that?
Why, good night. Thanks for saying hi.
Well, I actually also have to go and put my toddler down fairly shortly.
Joseph, tell us your name, Joseph.
Remy.
Remy.
Oh,
Hi,
hi,
Remy.
Remy.
David,
Hi, Remy.
sorry.
I was just saying I have a toddler to go and put down as well. So, Matt, your girlfriend is asking for your favorite Great Divorce quotation. You can tell her about that after this stream. Why don't you just wrap this up?
No, I just want to say thank you for everyone for joining and giving the time for this to be able to share some of your own experiences with Lewis, your passion for Lewis, and the way that you guys have expressed that. Obviously, thank you for the time that you do outside of this on a weekly basis for the Lewis community, spreading the specific areas that you guys focus on. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for anyone who's watching this live or after the fact for your love of Lewis and allowing Lewis to form within you a little more of Jesus Christ through his works. And it's just been so good to be here, and it's been fun to meet a number of you guys for the first time virtually and to hear your guys' journeys and stories. So genuinely thank you. And most importantly, thank David Bates for the endless time that he put into planning this and this idea.
To David.
To David.
David.
To David.
To me.
Fellas, I wish I could have all of you all and your families over and cook you a big meal. And if we don't do that before heaven, let's in heaven we'll go to the Eagle and Child or somewhere and hang out there. But if we get a chance to meet before then,
been the new heavens and new earth, new London,
new pints,
new pints, yeah.
And hopefully next year when we'll have the second C.S. Lewis reading day.
Yes.
When we go further up
and
further in.
Further in. Cheers.
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 And the blessing of the Almighty God be upon you all forever.